Hello, Chris. Hello, world. I'm
Hello.
Kara. Welcome to the DM Deep Dive for D&D Newcastle. I'm here today with a very exciting Dungeon Master reveal. I don't know, people might know already, but our first ever Chronicle Mode at D&D Newcastle is being run by my current guest, Mr. Chris Haitley, joining us from the UK this afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Hello.
It is about 7 p.m. Early
Wonderful.
evening.
Lovely. Well, it's wonderful to have you, Chris. It's great to see you. And I am super excited about getting into the Chronicle Mode situation for D&D Newcastle this fall. For those of you who are learning about Chronicle Mode for the first time at D&D Newcastle, our guests play sort of 4 days. They play their game over 4 days, 3 sort of full gaming days, plus an intro day. And if you join Chronicle Mode, you play 1 game across 2 events. So that's across basically 8 days of gaming of a single campaign. So you get double the length if you sign up for both events and then select Chronicle Mode as your campaign. So Chris is running the first ever of this format. It was our first ever Dungeon Master for this particular format, and very excited to hear what you have planned for your players and all about this epic game. So Chris, what can you tell us? You're going to be at the fall events. So from October 28th to November 8th. There's going to be 1 long campaign with a couple days break in the middle. So tell us all about what you got planned for your players.
So it's an idea I've had for quite a while now. I think back in like 2018 for a different event, I kind of posited the idea that you play different editions of D&D over a number of days, essentially, so that you get a feel for the history of the game, how it developed from like 1974's white box through to AD&D, what happened with it when Wizards of the Coast bought it. You got 3rd edition, 4th edition, then the one we all know, 5th edition. And I kind of mentioned this in passing, and then you guys came back to me with it. So basically, the campaign's going to be split into 2 halves. You'll have the first half, which is the TSR era. Just day 1 is going to be OD&D, the original white box, with all of its flaws and all of its strange little idiosyncrasies. Then we'll go into the seminal edition, AD&D First Edition, which I'm really excited to run. I'm a huge fan of Gary Gygax's First Edition. And then to show kind of what went alongside that, we'll be playing Moldvay Cook Basic, which is kind of a simplified version of the game, designed to kind of basically onboard people. And then week 2, we're going to be playing the Wizards of the Coast editions. So we're going to be playing 3rd edition rather than 3.5, because it kind of gives you an idea of what WotC wanted to do with it when they first bought it. Then 4th edition, which is a polarizing edition. I've never run it before, so I'm really interested to run that one. And then we're going to skip 5th edition, and we're going to go straight into D&D Next, 5.5, 1 D&D, whatever it's called these days. The 2024 Player's Handbook, which is going to be so new. It's released in it's not out yet. I don't have the rules to read. So I have bitten off a lot, and fingers crossed I can chew it.
Yeah. So you're going to be playing a different edition every day of the campaign. This is sort of the romp through the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and the reason we responded positively when we heard about this idea you'd had. We thought, this is our moment, let's do this, and partnered with you on creating this was as a celebration of 50 years of D&D. I mean, this is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, and this event is where we're sort of marking that moment in history at D&D Newcastle and celebrating this wonderful game that people have enjoyed so much. I was on a call 2 days ago with Jim Zub, who is coming to the castle and dungeon mastering at the second round of D&D Newcastle, and he is a multi-versions guy, and you're not wrong about the 4th edition being we don't talk about 4th edition, and it's interesting that you're skipping 3.5, which is probably the one we probably get. 1st edition and 3.5. Those are the 2 that people ask us about, that people say, are any of the games in these editions? And yet you're skipping one of the more beloved ones of those editions. So tell me more, what made you want to do 3rd and 4th and not 3.5?
It was the game itself. Just to clarify as well, it's not, rather than being 6 individual one shots, we're using the same characters throughout. So you build characters in white box and then play those characters through each edition. So you kind of get to see what characters look like in each edition. But to come back to your question, I decided that since this game is kind of one half narrative and one half history lesson, people can go and play 3.5. It's the easiest thing in the world. You can play, all the books are still available, and Pathfinder is basically 3.5. What was more interesting to me was taking the kind of seeing how what he wanted to do with D&D, and their initial vision, like the first thing they did with it, how they stamped their mark on Dungeons and Dragons, especially at a time when fantasy role-playing games weren't very cool. Like the D&D purchase, as far as I'm aware from reading, was kind of seen as a money sink with games like Vampire the Masquerade and all those little indie titles coming up in the 90s. So to me, it was the interest of seeing the comparison between first edition and third, rather than the more polished 3.5. Now, whether that's the right decision, I'm not entirely sure. But I'm a huge history nerd, so seeing that comparison and that pure comparison was just way more interesting.
And how are people going to deal with their characters? They going to have to revise their character sheets between days, or are they going to be able to, like, how is that going to work technically?
So to a certain extent, there's going to be a lot of there will be a certain amount of suspension of disbelief, because characters are going to change. Their abilities are going to change on a literally on a daily basis. Their class will change from time to time, because of the way that classes have changed through editions. Their races will change. I think I'm assuming I've got half my characters in at the moment. I'm just waiting on the other half. I think a lot of people are going to be playing humans on day one, and then playing other races that didn't exist in early editions by the time we get to 5th edition. And that'll be a case of looking at who the character is going to be, and then kind of reskinning a lot of the stuff as we move backwards. So mechanical humans are going to be, Dragonborn or Drow or something like that. But so essentially on a night, we'll be sitting down and we'll be rebuilding that character in another edition, using the rules for character creation in that edition, and just seeing what that character looks like. Seeing how each edition changes a fighter. Like, what does a fighter look like in OD&D versus 2024 Player's Handbook?
It sounds
again,
almost like
kind of show that little bit of, yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, if
it'll be a funny thing.
Yeah. It sounds like an enormous amount of work that you've created for yourself, Chris.
Oh yes, it is.
I feel your strengths, though. You've run D&D at D&D Newcastle before. You've been running one shots at D&D Newcastle for some time now, and you ran an actual campaign for the first time at D&D Newcastle in the spring. What was that like? You've been at D&D Newcastle, you've been around it, you've been obviously playing D&D for a very long time, and even running games publicly and so on. Playing at the castle as a dungeon master, was it how you expected it to be?
It was a funny thing. I know from the one shots just how good the players are. Even just playing one shots, like little pickup games, throw away, bits and bobs here and there. There's such an instant investment that I wasn't surprised by the caliber of player. What did surprise me was because I never did the 8-hour, 10-hour, day-long games, because I only really started DMing when I was a bit older, when I had a marriage and a job and responsibilities. So the thing that really got me on day one was how much my throat hurt after 8 hours of constant DMing. how much my brain hurt from just constant mental acrobatics. But it was excellent. I like the learning all of that on the go was fantastic. The ability to really dive down and drill down into a game, and not have to worry about telling people what happened, 2 weeks ago, a month ago. Again, is something I've not really dealt with before, or enjoyed before, I should say. So yeah, the caliber of player, the ability to just kind of get into a game on a really emotional level was incredible. It's also the only game I've ever had where everybody at the table cried at the end.
I thought you made people cry all the time, Chris. You're the DM that they say, I think Chris hates us. I'm pretty sure you're the enemy DM. That's your reputation.
I make Gemma cry a lot. Not for emotional reasons. She just can't take the strain.
So speaking of this, tell me what the actual story. Tell me about the actual, what you can without spoilers, because people may be watching. But what can you tell me about how you've designed this game that's going to span multiple editions, and how you've incorporated those different editions and brought them out through that narrative?
So without too many spoilers, what I've tried to do is try to show I'm going to try and show each edition in its best light. So OD&D is the game starts in the village of Homlet, which is a classic Gary Gygax beginner module, generally regarded as one of the best starter villages ever made. So we'll be starting in that, doing a little dungeon crawl to get us started, followed by a little bit of investigation, which is the origin of this much larger kind of Forgotten Realms spanning adventure, tracking down no, I can't say this because I've given them a few little prologue items. Basically, tracking down this cult that is trying to start something that the players very likely would rather they did not.
And then they have to try. That's as much as we get.
I'm genuinely not sure how much I can say without spoiling it.
Okay. For sure.
It is epic. The idea is, I'm trying to remember what I've written. For my games, I tend to like writing little fiction elements beforehand so that players get to know some of the NPCs they will meet, just to kind of prime them for who they should trust and who they shouldn't. So I'm just trying to remember what I've said in that. Yes, they get to explore. They'll get to explore a large part of the Forgotten Realms. Parts of it that they will know, parts of it that they won't know, because they're not covered very much in modern D&D. And they will learn of my penchant for incredibly stressful, dangerous, very deadly combat.
Nice. Is combat one of your sort of stronger pillars? I know that DMs all have their leanings, and everybody works in everything and they go with the players and all of that, but there are going to be ones that you're naturally drawn to and ones you have to work a little harder at. You're nodding, and yes, combat is your. I know that like combat in the real world, you're like, I just put that two and two together. So for those who don't know Chris personally, Chris is a battles historian guy. He knows all about the battles and all about the things used in the battles. So that is not at all surprising that battles are a thing for you.
I was for a very short period of time. I'm not gonna steal anybody's valor, but I was for a very short period of time in the army. My current hobby is 15th century longsword fencing. And up there you have Wars of the Roses, American Civil War, 3000 Battle of Tsushima. I love combat. Combat is absolutely my strongest pillar. It's something that I think, when done properly, can be really entertaining. Can go on for a long time without becoming dull, and really tests the players in a way that not a lot of other things do. If you set up a really clever combat situation, players who are used to just a flat board with a few minis on, kind of walking around and then becoming very stagnant, the minute you start throwing elements in there that throw them off, or terrain, or new forces coming in from one side, it can really throw players off. When I was primarily DMing online, adding in enforced line of sight so you couldn't see everything on the battlefield became really, really important, and very, very stressful. Anybody who does come to the castle, hunt down, again, Gemma and Liam, their staff on site most of the time, and ask them about the Star Wars 5th edition game that I ran, and you'll get some harrowing stories. Combat, absolutely one of my strongest pillars. I also spend a lot of time, put an awful lot of effort into the ambience of a game. So there's a lot of the terrain builds are usually very big, very involved, very detailed. Everything's painted. The music for this campaign alone, I've trawled through, I think, about 200 hours of music to put together playlists for various different things, to really score it rather than just having ambient music, but to have a score so that each story beat has its soundtrack, basically. They're probably the two things that I would say I put the most work into.
You're a crafting guy too. You were running our painting workshops for a while as well at D&D Newcastle. So there's mini painting and things to paint that you can just sit at the mini table between your campaign sessions and relax and unwind and let your brain have a rest painting stuff. And I know you've made stuff for our other DMs as well, for other games over the years. Are you planning some epic builds for this game?
Yes, because of the historic nature of it, a lot of the minis getting me used are my classic minis, old Ralpatha, all that kind of thing. And for the big finale, there will be, hopefully, if I can get it finished in time, some fairly epic terrain going on. Ruined walls, rubble piles everywhere. Something suitably epic. Yes, there will be. Probably not as much as there was for the youth table, because for the youth table I didn't have to memorize 6 different editions of the game. But yes, it's going to be epic. I can't help it. I just have to.
You're a little compulsive about making it intense.
Yeah. Every time I think it's fine, I'll just have a whiteboard marker mat. It'll be fine. Like, the players will still have a great time. I realize no, I just can't do that.
You can't constitutionally make yourself run like a straight theater of the mind game. Oh no. Let's have some fun. I do want to ask you though, the last game that you ran, that was actually the youth table, which is a little bit of a fun story for the viewers. I'll just share a little bit. So we had 2 father and son duos that wanted to come with their younger players, and so we set up a table for them, which was the youth table, which is an option that we have, and we asked Chris to dungeon master that because we thought he would be a great match for them, mostly because they had self-identified as like mega nerds, and we're like, we need to meet them where they're at or beyond. We don't need somebody they're gonna be able to poke holes in it. I feel like Chris is that guy, so that was largely why we picked Chris to run that game. And so we had the 4 original players, and then we had another couple that joined, and we gave them another option as well. But they picked your game, even though it was the youth table, because they thought, that sounds like an awful lot of fun. So I think your experience at D&D Newcastle is quite broad in terms of experienced versus not experienced versus different ages, etc. For this particular game, I think some people might be intimidated by this game because it involves, so many different versions. And are they going to need to know the rules of that? Or do you think someone can just dive in and you'll take care of the rules and they can just, jump in and role play, except?
Not by any stretch. They can. The idea is anybody can jump in. I'm not making any assumptions about what anybody knows. My background as a DM, I've run a lot of open public games in pubs, and the idea with that is anybody can turn up, and 60% of my players had never played before, so I was having to teach at times up to 15 people at a time how to play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition in a noisy bar. So one of my skills is, I'm saying this now, fingers crossed this plays out. I'm setting my own bar very high here. But I can generally explain rules to people quite well. I tend to just, all I expect from players is, what are you doing? What's your character doing? And then from there, I'll kind of strip that back into mechanics and tell them what they need to do, what they need to roll, what part of their character sheet covers the thing they want to do. So if they want to sneak, in first edition, I'll just say, how do you want to sneak? Because there's no stat for that. There's no roll. There's just, okay, well, how are you doing it? And then I adjudicate that. In fifth edition, in 5.5, I get them to roll a stealth check. I'll point them to the dice they need. We'll work it all out. I'm much more interested in people having fun and people enjoying each edition for what it's good at, than people coming in knowing every rule back to front, being able to build their own characters on their own, any of that stuff. I'm far more interested in, are you having fun? Are you enjoying yourself? Is the story speaking to you? I'd much rather people had that attitude.
I feel like you're like the local tour guide who's like going to show them all the best spots. You don't have to know the town. That's the point. Chris is going to take you through and be like, this is the good place to eat. Don't go to that shop. They'll always overcharge you. This is something the tourists don't know about. And you're going to take them like a tour guide through those editions and show them what was great about them and tell them what to avoid, because that's just not the best corner of that particular alley. And there is a question here. Oh, Kara.
I was just going to say that's my aim. My players for the Chronicle mode so far seem to have a good stretch of knowledge themselves. They all have a couple of editions under their belt, so I'm actually as excited to learn from people who played those editions at the time as they might be to play with me, who kind of is running each edition.
We do have a question. Great concept, Chris. Curious if there's anything you've learned from the other editions that you want to make a return, like rules, DM tips, etc.
There absolutely is. I don't know if there's anything I would suggest they bring back in terms of rules, with maybe one or two exceptions. I do think there is a huge amount to learn as a DM from the early editions. I think, so just to get them out of the way, the two things I think they should bring back mechanically are minions from 4th edition, and skill challenges from 3rd, I think, off the top of my head. Minions are just, if you've got characters, you don't want to have to deal with like individual hit points for 30 different goblins. They all have 1 hit point. They're the same stat block. They just have 1 hit point. You hit them, they're gone. That is an excellent rule. Everybody should be doing that, especially once your players get to a certain level. And skill challenges are a more interesting way of dealing with, of abstracting different things. So, for example, if you don't want to mess around with having to sneak through a corridor or something, everybody just tells the DM how they're going to do something that benefits the group as they do this group task. And then you get them to roll a check. If they get a certain number of successes before failures, they succeed, and otherwise they don't. Both excellent things everybody should be doing. They should be in the rule books. But everybody should play old school D&D, because you don't have skills. Nobody has skill checks. You as the DM have to adjudicate things, and you don't know how hard that is until you're asked to do it. When you start in 5th edition, and you can just go, okay, roll me a stealth check and let the dice decide, going back to AD&D and having somebody say, hi, I'm a fighter. I would like to sneak. I'm going to take my armor off and I would like to sneak past this guard. There's nothing to roll. You can cheat and get them to roll a dexterity check and just roll less than their score, but it's kind of going against the point of the game. There is a part of us as a DM, even somebody who doesn't mind killing players, who doesn't want to be the person telling them that they failed. They want the dice to tell them that they failed. And there is something very freeing and very challenging about being forced to be the one who adjudicates what the world is doing. And I think there is a lot of worth in going back to those early editions and learning how they were played and how that can impact how modern editions are played.
Very nice. You have been, you've said you started Dungeon Mastering as an adult. How long have you been playing for, Chris?
So it's funny. I actually technically I started DMing when I was in school, when I was about 15, 14, 15, 16. I forget exactly which. One of my friends started a D&D club and we didn't know what it was. So we just went along. And he was a terrible, terrible DM. Incredibly adversarial. First session was, here are some level 4 characters, you fighting a dragon. And we got TPK'd, we were murdered. And all of us turned around and went, what? We're not coming back.
Why would I say that?
Like, what is this game? And our geography teacher, he took over and played us through his homebrewed edition of, or his homebrewed version of AD&D. And it was a ton of fun. My fighter got killed in the first combat. It was great. That kind of spurred something in me. I'd already been wargaming since I was 8, and I was kind of used to game design, like building stuff for Warhammer 40,000 mostly. So then me and my best friend at the time, David Todd, basically just started writing our own RPGs and running them for each other. And then that stopped. I left that school, went to a different one. We all kept in touch, but stopped playing D&D. And then when was it? 2014. So yeah, 10 years. I picked up the 5th edition starter set on a whim. Started running for a few people. And then before I knew it, I was running a game every 2.5 days across 7 campaigns in 6 different settings. For upwards of I think a combined 45 to 50 people, and now I'm here. It's been a wild ride. It
has been a wild ride. For those who have not we did a very brief interview with you when we did the live stream at Langley Castle, which ended up not being a live stream, but ended up being an actual broadcast due to ghosts in the wires. It's a very haunted place, Langley Castle. For those of you who didn't catch that, Chris crashed our D&D in the castle back in 2019, and we just kind of let him after that. It's like, I like this guy, and he's really great, really helpful, and knows his stuff, and is really supportive, and has been a long-time supporter of D&D in the castle. So you've told the story before about basically the caretaker at the castle we were using at the time knew you and was like, you should come and see this thing. And you thought it must be some dorky thing. And then it turned out like to be full of heroes unexpectedly in the northeast of England.
there is a memory that will never leave me, ever. Like you say, Richard Shrimpton, one of my friend's dads, and I was friends with him as well, was the groundskeeper of Langley Castle, where you guys were, and kind of invited me along, and I thought it was just some fan event, really. I had no idea what it was. So I rocked up after almost not going. I almost found an excuse to just not go. And I walked in through the front doors, turned left, went to have a chat with I can't remember if I've met you and Cam before this or just after. But I went and had a chat with the castle GM, and just kind of absentmindedly looked up and saw Jeremy Crawford walking down the stairs with a pot of tea. I was like, oh no, I shouldn't be here. this is, I am way out of my depth, and I can vividly remember that. It was an experience. Sitting down and having dinner with James Introcasso and chatting about game design in Dungeon of the Mad Mage was very, very interesting.
One of the things that is so lovely about this event is that really it is a collection of these titans of the game in a way. Jeremy Crawford's, James Introcasso's, that could go on, Keith Baker, blah blah blah.
Yes.
Ginny D, for goodness sake, was there. But how lovely they all are. Like, how down to earth, and at the core, they're all nerds, man. Like they're hardcore into D&D. Like that's kind of the definition. And so, like, it's just nerds in a castle. you know? There's
Yeah.
a certain aspect of really down to earthness about even the names that we have at D&D Newcastle.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, listen, we're coming up on our time. So what I'm going to do, you are coming, I'm just going to remind the viewers, you're coming at November 28th to October 28th to November 8th to both rounds back to back. There's one spot left for that continuous campaign. And if anybody is interested in learning more, you can go to dndnewcastle.com to find out about this game called The Fourth Seal. And you can also read about Chris Hately, who is listed on our Dungeon Masters listings on our page there. And if you have questions, there is a chat function there where you can chat with a real live person. And if we aren't actually physically there, we'll follow up with you by email, but feel free to ask us anything or any questions you have for Chris. I'm going to ask you, Chris, to take us out, and we will follow with an outro video to inspire you all and make you be full of FOMO and want to come to our D&D Newcastle event this fall and play with Chris. It's been lovely chatting with you. I'm going to invite you to take us out, inviting the people to come and play in your game or come to D&D Newcastle at all this fall and play in the Fourth Seal and Chronicle Mode with you. So take us away.
If you have an interest in the history of Dungeons & Dragons, how the game has changed over the years, in what the Forgotten Realms setting looked like in 1989, then I can't think of a better opportunity than playing each game back to back in the incredible setting that is Langley Castle, in my own beautiful home county. Yes, if you have any interest in that, come, please. You really will not regret it. And take that from somebody who isn't a celebrity DM, who is just a fan, who's just some local kid who gets to do this. You really will not regret it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us, Chris. And we look forward to seeing you in the fall. And everybody else, we look forward to seeing you at a castle soon. Thanks so much for being here.